Aerodynamics is known as the pioneers of the American steel coaster world, creating the first tubular track coaster and the first successful inverting coaster, along with many other innovations. While more advanced design and new manufacturers caused their run to end around the turn of the century, their reign of dominance was felt by all parks around the world for nearly 50 years. As the defunct company's rides become more and more rare, there are still plenty of parks who maintain and cherish their rides to this day. So here are the top 10 parks with the most aero track of all time. Number 10 on the list is actually not even a park, it's a hotel. Even stranger, it's only one coaster, showing just how much of a beast Desperado is. Aero only built 4 hypercoasters, and all but one of those giant models make the list. Desperado was the longest and had the biggest drop of all of them, with a gigantic sprawling layout around Buffalo Bill's Casino with 5,843 feet of track. Number 9 belongs to a park you may not expect, with Knott's Berry Farm. While the most known aero here is the original looping coaster, Corkscrew, the real length comes from the steeplechase coaster, Motorcycle Chase. Later rethemed to Wacky Soapbox Racers, this was a group of 4 small single-railed coasters that would race along in connected vehicles. The tracks climbed 2 lift hills and completed simple layouts, but the multiple tracks created a super fun racing element and brought the park to nearly 6,000 feet in total. The next park on the list comes from a pair of inverting coasters at Six Flags Great America. Originally named Turn of the Century, today the Demon features 2 corkscrews and 2 loops that were added later. The second Aero would come a decade later and open as Aero's largest coaster and the first in the world with 7 inversions. Shockwave was a beast of a coaster, reaching 65 miles per hour and featured 3 loops, a batwing, and a double corkscrew finale. Sadly, Shockwave was retired in 2002, but the Demon still haunts the park, which has featured over 6,000 feet of aero track. Next up is a park you may not think of at first, since the park doesn't exist anymore, Astroworld. The Six Flags park featured 3 aero coasters, with the smallest being Serpent, one of Aero's few mini mine trains, with less than 1,000 feet of track. Along with that would be a full-sized mine train, Excalibur, with a very basic layout, as well as XLR8. This compact suspended coaster featured 2 lift hills and took the park to 6,447 feet of track. Six Flags Great Adventure takes the next spot, with a solid lineup of aero coasters. This is the first park on the list to feature Aero's launched loop model, and in fact, they had 2 of them. Lightning Loops were a pair of shuttle coasters with interlocking vertical loops, and both featured a short 635 feet of track. Next to those would be yet another mine train, which is the only aero coaster still operating at the park. The final would be another 7 inversion mega looper, the Great American Scream Machine, with the same elements of the massive Shockwave but with a red color scheme. These 4 coasters take the park to over 7,000 feet of track and number 6 on the list. Number 5 belongs to the beautiful Busch Gardens Williamsburg, with one of the most famous trios of aero coasters out there. The first to open would be the Loch Ness Monster, the tallest coaster in the world upon opening. The coaster was also the first to feature interlocking loops, and is coming out of a lengthy refurbishment to keep it operational for years to come. The other 2 have sadly closed, with the most fondly remembered being the Big Bad Wolf, an iconic suspended coaster. The ride would begin by flying through a German village, before an iconic dive towards the river. The third in the trilogy was the infamous Drakenfire, the awkward coaster that tried to mimic a B&M looper. These 3 coasters, which were all substantial rides, skyrockets this park to over 9,500 feet of track. The next slot goes to the only park outside of America, as Blackpool Pleasure Beach features a dense lineup of aero coasters. We have the only other steeplechase, this time with only 3 tracks, but all slightly longer with horse-themed trains. Along with those smaller rides is another short shuttle loop with Revolution, but that's just the warm-up for the biggest one, named the Big One. Longer than all the other arrows in the park combined, this opened as the tallest coaster in the world, and completes a scenic tour around the park, similar to Desperado. This historic lineup makes this collection the first to pass 10,000 feet in track as we make our way into the top 4. Number 2 and 3 are neck and neck, with the bronze going to Kings Island. This lineup of 5 coasters features a 3rd launched loop named the Demon, and yet another mine train named Adventure Express. This amazing layout carves down the hillside with excellent theming, before a large lift hill to bring it back to the station. The park benefits from ironically having 2 suspended coasters named the Bat, even though both didn't operate together. The original was the first suspended coaster, and famously only operated for 3 seasons due to the intense forces from the unbanked track. The second would open 10 years after the original's closure, initially with the name Top Gun, before going back to the Bat theme, with a layout nearly 1,000 feet longer. The largest in the park was Vortex, the first coaster with 6 inversions, standing imposingly at the back of the park. These 5 coasters take the park to over 12,000 feet and just 524 feet short of second place. Silver goes to Six Flags Magic Mountain, where all their aero coasters continue to operate. The lineup begins similar enough to Kings Island, with a mine train, suspended coaster, and mega looper, before things get crazy. Gold Rusher and Ninja both feature terrain layouts, and Viper one-ups Vortex as the 3rd Aero 7 inversion mega looper. The final, though, would be arguably Aero's best coaster, with the one-of-a-kind X 4th Dimension coaster. This final coaster for Aero would put them into bankruptcy, but features 3,600 feet of pure insanity, with rotating seats along the outside of the track to give a thrill to riders never seen before. And number 1 hilariously goes to Cedar Point, with a length nearly double second place on the list. This park's aero collection surpasses 20,000 feet, with 6 coasters contributing to that massive milestone. The oldest is the simple Cedar Creek Mine Ride, followed by Corkscrew, the first coaster to feature 3 inversions. The park also features another suspended coaster with Iron Dragon, which glides over the water with 2 lift hills, before the final 2 behemoths of the park. Gemini opened the same year as Loch Ness Monster, and competed for the height record with a shorter height but a larger drop. These would be 2 gigantic twin layouts and would race side by side with a red and blue train, with both layouts featuring nearly 4,000 feet of track. But opening right next door less than a decade later would be the iconic Magnum XL 200, the world's first hypercoaster. This maverick of a ride was the first full-circuit coaster to reach 200 feet, and its incredibly fast 5,000-foot layout inspired an entire war of coasters for the next 15 years after its debut. What did you think? Were there any surprises? Did you expect Cedar Point to rule by such a large margin? Let me know down below.